Hi, Steve.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
What's up, man? Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you bet, man. Where are you coming out of?
I'm in Utah.
Utah, right on. We're
How
at
about
Utah.
you?
I'm in
Um,
Kansas. I'm in Kansas City.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just South Salt Lake, about 20 miles in Orem.
Okay. Man, I went to Colorado last summer for a wedding and drove to San Diego. I love that
Yeah,
part of the country. Just eye candy everywhere. We did
yeah.
stop in Utah at one place, and it just looked like the mountains were a bunch of wax that melted. And when you're landlocked in Kansas City, you don't see anything. So when
Oh,
you're out
yeah.
there, you're like, man,
Amazing, huh?
thank God for digital photography because I'm a photography head. And I remember when I used
Oh,
to have to
cool.
pack up for trips in the 90s, I'd have to get the
Uh-huh.
30 paper rolls. Now I'm just snapping everything, just anything, every my fingers are tired after trips like that. So
Yeah, there's a lot to do and a lot of different scenery, which is really cool.
yeah,
Lots of big mountains. Then you go to southern Utah and you've got, all the Zions and all the different parks down there. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, I've
Beautiful
I've
country.
snowmobiled the same day that I played golf before. It's
Yeah,
been
yeah, yeah. Well,
crazy.
that happens in a different way in Missouri because sometimes it'll be like 60 degrees. I'm out with my son playing basketball, and the next day it's like 10 below. It's like, what happened?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
It's wild. So,
Crazy.
well, hey man, before we hop into your life, you have a very interesting timeline and story of redemption and salvation and getting back at it and all of these different elements. I want to know, how did you survive COVID? How did you get through that 3-year period now that the world's waking up? And how has it changed you?
You know what's interesting is I there was times that during COVID I actually would feel guilty in a sense because it didn't affect me that much. It didn't affect my family really. Um, you know, I was an anti-mask guy, and I think I wore a mask maybe two or three times when I was forced at a Costco. But as soon as I was handed one walking in, because I'd never go with one, they'd hand me one and then I'd put it in my pocket.
Yeah.
It was crazy because one specific time I had three or four people come up to me and actually thank me for not wearing it. They're wearing theirs, but again, they're too worried about what other people think or going to say
Yeah.
to them. But for some reason, man, that's something I've been very, very passionate about. In fact, I have a totally different podcast called Truth Talk with Steve that I go into a lot of those types of topics. But from a business standpoint, from a mental standpoint, like I say, I at times because I know what was going on with so many other people in different parts of the country and how tough it was. And it's like I say, there was times that I literally felt kind of guilty because it didn't have that big of impact that I knew it was on so many other people.
There's almost this buyer's remorse. I get a lot of people that are like, it was actually a time of reflection, slowed down, did different things. And
Yeah.
it didn't discount anything that was going on, the carnage and the divisiveness and all these things that were just so bad about that time period. But I think it's just all about it. There was a monopoly on things. You either choose to do what you
Yeah.
did before, you know, or you do it
Yeah.
in the way that you did before. If it was bad, it was going to get worse. So it was an interesting time to live
Yeah.
through.
So true. But
Um,
it was like you say, from a standpoint of having more time, even though life was fairly normal for me, there was a lot more time of reflection and things, and like you say, that slowing down in a way because of what was going on, which to me I found is a big positive, because I have a hard time slowing down, a hard time quieting, even though I try to meditate consistently, it still is a struggle.
yeah.
And from a spiritual standpoint, I grew up in religion since I was born into, here in Utah. I mean, I was born in California, but in Utah since I was five, and a Mormon. But I I've had the most spiritual 3 years of my life out of all 55 years because I woke up to what's going on in religion, especially in the Mormon church, which that's a whole other topic. But it gave me a chance to really look inward, but also try to connect with God, which that's what I call my higher power is God, and realize that it's really just a one-to-one connection. We don't need nothing wrong with religion. There's a lot of good things in religion, and there's a lot of good. It's kind of your tribe, so that makes it very difficult when you're stop. But you know, like I say, I've had more spiritual experiences the last 3 years than I had the whole rest of my life,
Yeah. There was a lot
which
that
is,
went into it. Yeah. Yeah. Just
yeah,
little moments. I remember at one point I went
yeah,
to a nature sanctuary with my son. I lived next to one, and
uh-huh,
we saw this dude get out of his car with this big camera, and I'm like, is that a bald eagle? And there was a bald eagle that came flying and swooping over the water, and he
wow,
kind of came over to me and said, I've been waiting to see this for 10 years. And I'm just like, wow. We just pulled up.
no,
I think we
no
were doing a
way,
telehealth call, and I did that a lot during the pandemic. I would get the kids in the car and we would go and look at things. So anyways, yeah, those little moments, like nature woke up, the
yeah,
birds and everything was like, man, these noisy people are asleep or something's up. And they just were
yeah,
like, we're gonna get out and party. We're gonna do it up. So it was kind of cool that way.
so
Um,
true, yeah.
so, so let's get to the essence of who you are and what you do. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders, career day. One of the kids looks up and says, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
That's a great question. I've spent a lot of my whole life trying to find businesses that solve a problem, that serve other people. And, the current businesses I'm in right now, one of them is a software business that, with what's happened, in our world, and say if we're here at speaking to the class of the third graders, you're here in school. But because of the things we've talked about, what happened with COVID and all that, we obviously know online learning has become a very big thing, and it's continuing to grow on a significant scale. And so I, had frustrations with things in my business that one platform would do this or one would do that, and so I'd need several different things to try to do the things needed to build a business. And so I decided there's got to be a way to put all of this under one place that would then, make it simpler for people, eliminate multiple subscriptions, and allow them to, have the sales and marketing platform needed for course creators is really what our focus is on right now.
Okay. So when you were in
So
the
that you
third
can
grade,
do,
oh, no, no, go ahead.
no, I say that, because of, so much of the learning going online, um, you know, I've tried to create courses over the years and have so, but I've always been frustrated at the difficulty to learn certain softwares. And so, we wanted to make it not only easy for the course creator, but also have everything else they would need, to build their business, to market their business, a CRM to, capture all their leads and the pipeline, the whole 9 yards to really, understand what's going on in their business.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What'd you want to be when you grew up?
You know, I've thought about that a lot. And I think it was just the typical stuff, but doctor, fireman, policeman. But as I've thought about that, as I've talked to people, over the last year or so, why was that? You know, it was just because that was what you typically heard. I mean,
Yeah.
because I honestly cannot say that there was something inside of me that really wanted to do X. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just I
Yeah.
didn't. And so if I was asked that in school, which I was, it was that typical answer.
Yeah, that's what we were all doing. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I remember watching Chips and I wanted to be a cop. And then
Oh,
I'm like,
chips.
as I got older, it's like, why would I want to do that? Like, it's just not
Yeah.
in my wheelhouse. So let me ask you this. You said you were born in California, raised in Utah. Talk to me a little bit about growing up. What were the seeds that were planted into you to become who you are today? How did you grow into you?
Good question. Yeah. I grew up, in a middle class family. Like I said, a religious family. Went to church, every week. And there was a lot of good things there because there was, good group of guys, and I did have some very, good leaders that, to this day, one of them I really respect. He treated us the way a kid should be treated. I mean, he really cared. He wasn't trying to boss you around. He wasn't trying to make you feel bad if you made a mistake. He was just a real good person. And, but, like I said, I grew up in a middle class family. I wasn't the most popular kid, but, I was in some of the in crowds, I guess, so to speak. I played sports. Baseball and golf were the sports I played in high school. My father was a dentist and he was an entrepreneur too. Real estate was like his hobby.
Okay.
And when I say real estate, it was larger type commercial stuff. It wasn't residential specs or any of that. And my father, I grew up like I told you in Provo, Utah, and I know you would know this, but maybe some of your audience does or doesn't. But Stephen Covey wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I went to high school with the Coveys, and my dad was the dentist to Stephen Covey, and so my dad was really into self-improvement, and he was always trying to be on the cutting edge of his of his profession in dentistry. So he was always doing the extra things to learn what was coming next and try to stay ahead of the curve, whether it's on technology or whatever. And then once again, he'd go to, I remember him and my mother going to, 2 and 3 day seminars that were your seminar that was more focused, on self-improvement or on relationships, etc. And so I was exposed to that stuff. And then, watching my dad as a dentist, even though we did very, very well, I can't tell you how many Sunday nights, he'd be talking and say, man, it's already Sunday night. I got to go to work tomorrow. Like he's dreading it, that. And then also he would, would be on vacation and say, geez, you got to find something you can do, Steve, where, you can be making money while you're, away. And, because when he's out of the office, if he's sick or whatever the issue, he's not making any money. And so, so I got kind of some of those seeds planted. Then he built a full service car wash, gas station, and convenience store when I was a sophomore in high school. It opened. And absentee ownership is oftentimes a bad idea. And at 19 years old, I caught the general manager stealing. And basically, he wrote a check to Cellular One. This is in 1989. So think about how many people had cell phones back then. Very, very few.
Yeah.
And here's an on-site manager, and he's got a cell phone, and his 1 month's bill was $810. And I don't know how, but I saw the check, and I wasn't involved in the office stuff at this time or anything. And so I went and told my dad. He says, what the hell is Dave paying, cellular bill for this much? And my dad terminated him the next day. And I was then thrown in to run the place. Now, granted, I'm 19. I don't know I know of accounts payable and receivable, but, I'd worked in the detail shop. I had cashiered. I had done all the different things, all the different jobs the facility had, but I didn't know how to operate anything. I didn't know how to be a boss. And now I'm thrown in as the boss at 19, and there's quite a few college kids that work there. So there's, probably, I'd say 50% of the employees, we had between 25 to 35 employees at any given time, are older than me. And so I was incredibly intimidated because here I am, the boss's kid, and are they going to respect me? And that was a challenge, but, it all worked out because I hated school. I was in college at the time when this took place, and I dropped out because I really did not like school. And, because of the facility, the type it was, we had a lot of people coming through, and, a lot of, when you're detailing very nice cars, the type of people that are driving those have money. And so I built a network that was really, that value alone was worth everything, let alone everything else I learned. But so, like I say, I grew up very, I had a good life. I really did. I didn't have, at this point, I hadn't had any drug issues or any of that kind of stuff. But like I say, that taught me really the core of the 3 things that really, to me, mattered most in business, no matter what business it is. My grandfather, he ran BYU Brigham Young University's food service for 35 years with my grandmother, and they opened up every facility in the world that they have to that point. But when he retired, he started hanging around my dad's car wash because my dad got his total ass handed to him. That car wash about buried him. We were able to turn it around and then sell it. And so he got out a few years later. But my grandfather, when he would hang around there, he's a man of very few words, but he just had that presence about him, that people had a lot of respect. He was a guy that had over, tens of thousands of employees over 35 years. And he would come up to me and say, who's waxing your floor? He'd have the little putty knife, your putty knife or drywall, or whatever, and he'd be going around the mop boards and checking the wax and, scraping it. He was just very detail focused and say, you need to talk to your, people doing your floors or being a little sloppy. And so he taught me the importance of, paying attention to detail. But the real three critical things he taught me is, Steve, and obviously I'm talking car wash language, but it applies to any business, is you need to just focus on giving your customer the best quality car wash for a fair price in the best, amount of time that you can. And if you'll just focus on serving them and giving them what they came here for, that's all you need to focus on. Then if you'll remember that your employees, doesn't matter which one, whether, it's the person that's cleaning the bathrooms to, your manager, you need to make sure they understand that they matter, how important they are to your business. Because, everybody will work for a paycheck. Most people have heard this, but, most people will go to, any end really, for appreciation and feeling like they're important.
Yeah.
And, to me, just going through that experience, being thrown into that car wash situation, to have that, just those, two simple things right there that my grandpa taught me have served me in anything I've done,
Yeah.
And because really when it comes down to it, it's all about people. It's all about relationships.
Yeah.
And, if you can master that, or focus on that, you don't have to master it, but just focus on taking care of other people. And, and that's what my grandpa, I'd be lying if I said I'm great at that. I'd be a hypocrite. There's times that I'm selfish and forget, in certain situations. And it's crazy, but it seems like we forget that most with the people, closest to us, and because we take it for granted. It's not really a conscious thing. Sometimes it just happens, but, those were some of the most important lessons I've honestly learned in my whole life, because, humanity needs each other.
Yeah, for sure. So you've had to overcome addiction, and I got a quick story for you since I do jazz radio.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker, and I don't know how many people know this, but when he was in Kansas City, it was the famous cymbal that was thrown when he played on stage, and it was humiliating. If you played bad, they threw a cymbal and it crashed.
Oh,
So he
wow.
decided to get his chops going, and he went to the Ozarks, which is south of here a few hours. And he went down there, and there was a place that he was going to play at, and he got in a bad wreck, and they gave him morphine, and they pumped him up, and he got on the drugs, and it turned into a habit. And that's how, when people say, jazz musicians, junkies, that whole thing back in the day, Charlie was really beaten back, pain, and it just mushroomed.
Yeah.
And I know you had Crohn's and you had issues going on. You got weaned on it. That's why I'm kind of bringing that parallelism up. How did you get over it? How did you finally get to a point? Because I've read stories, like I'm reading Dwight Gooden's biography now. It's
Isn't it
exhausting,
crazy?
man. Back and forth and back and forth. And it's like, so how
Yeah.
did you finally overcome it?
It was a 14-year dance with the devil. And it's hard for me to talk about. But the reason it's hard to talk about is because I wanted out of that damn thing so bad.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how, And there's days I would drive to work just bawling because I was a very functioning addict. And in fact, it's almost like I did better. And I had a friend of mine who was in my building, and I went to him one day because he was a guy that I could, he wasn't religious, put it that way. So I didn't have all the BS attached if I was trying to talk to somebody that would try to, maybe respond with guilt or shaming you, where, I could just be me. And, this is no knock on him, but he's like, why is it a problem? Why is it a big deal? Look at what you're doing. Look, I just rebranded a business and was building that and it was going well. So kind of got the wrong message, but I really got sick and tired of it. And 2 years, the Crohn's is what started it. And then a couple of years later, I got married, and then at that point I was already abusing the pills. And then about 2 years into my marriage, I go home and tell my wife, this is hard now, that I didn't love her and basically needed to get a divorce. She was pregnant with our second kid, and your brain chemistry is totally messed up. And I truly believed that. I truly believed I'd be fine being a weekend dad. But after the years went on, you know, there were a lot of miracles that kept that marriage in place, because I left 3 times over an 18-year period before I got sober. And you know, when you get sober and you're in that situation, boy, it was brutal to realize what I was doing. And so I was just, you know, got to the point I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was able to realize, even though I was still messed up, that I was harming the people I cared about the most.
Yeah.
And even though I was functioning, that doesn't mean there's still not any wreckage, you know, that you're creating and harm that you're causing others, because there is. And, you know, I just had enough. And I had, in fact, the guy that became my mentor in the car wash industry, once I took over, and anyway, I met him a couple of years later when my dad opened his second facility, and he became my mentor. And he actually, you know, he's about, I think, 11 years older than I am. We became really close, and he actually was on pills, and he got off them about 14 months before I did. He went and did rapid detox, and, you know, of course, we still had a relationship. But as I saw him and the changes happening, I was like, you know, now I knew a way to make it happen without it being as painful, even though it was still pretty brutal. And I just finally had enough and just talked to him one day and said, what do I got to do to contact the place you went to and get this done? Because I'm done, you know?
Yeah. So
And
now, after all of this that you've lived through, what is the motivator for you every day? What gets you through the day?
just, you know, I'm blessed, you know, and I got a family that stayed together. You know, I'll be married 33 years in 8 days. I've got 2 granddaughters now. You know, one's just over a year and one's 3 months. And I've got 5 kids that kept their lives on track. It's just my family. That's it. I don't care
So,
about money. I don't care about the stuff that I used to think was so important. I mean, yes, you need it. And yes, I
sure.
enjoy life better when you have it. You know, it makes life a little easier for sure. But I mean, like we said earlier, it's about relationships. You know, first of all, it's family, but after that, your close relationships and friends. What more is there? There's really nothing more. But we get these crazy beliefs and kind of conditioned to think that all this other stuff matters when it doesn't.
So, of all the stories of success you've heard of recovery and people that have been inspirational in your life, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Jesus Christ.
Nice.
There's so many questions.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, there is. So,
Yeah.
let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the younger version of yourself, say in your 20s, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in this life. What would you tell that young version?
Be simple. You're good enough. Just be you. You're good enough. Because when I went through what I did, the hardest thing when I knew the truth, and I say this often, you know, there's things I did in my addiction that would have put me in prison. You know, I also had a situation with a big mortgage fraud case. I was at a big appraisal firm that ended up putting me in federal prison. And the addiction, there's things I did that should have put me there. The mortgage fraud case, I wasn't guilty of anything that I deserved to be there. However, it ended up being a blessing. But knowing that happened and then that was hitting the media and stuff was the hardest thing because of my name.
Yeah.
My dad and my grandfather have known in this community, and then all of a sudden I'm being put in the news, and I'm tarnishing that name.
But you overcame. That's the key. That's the key to
Oh,
all of it.
absolutely.
You could have,
Absolutely.
you know, the life is full of choices, and you either choose to redeem and find that salvation,
Absolutely.
you know, or you
Yeah.
don't, you know.
Yep. And thank the good Lord is I didn't, when I say you're good enough, I think there's a lot of underlying other issues. Well, I know there are related to my dad and, you know, taking over the business, how that dynamic and stuff. And, you know, I thought that was all resolved, but I worked with a couple of guys that have been on my podcast, and, you know, evidently it wasn't. They came out one day. I mean, I feel fine about it, but deep down there's still something. And, you know, and I think it's because my dad, I don't know how he did everything he did. You know, not only business, but family was always a priority. You know, we always did vacations, you know, until the day he died. We always were there I'm very blessed. All my siblings, I've got 5 siblings. We're all in the same county. So every first Sunday of the month, we'd go to my parents' house and, celebrate the birthdays for that coming month. And so we always made that a priority. He was always involved in the community and all sorts of stuff out. But as I've kind of processed that really was he wasn't perfect. We, you know what I mean? We all have our shortcomings and stuff, but yeah, that kid just knew he's good enough to be him. That's it.
So now, after all these years, where you're at now, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, colleagues, clients, but you live it, you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are today?
I think I'm a very compassionate, loyal person who still struggles because he puts other people before himself. um, but I'm content with who I am today. You know,
So if anyone wants to dig deeper into your story, learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where can they go?
I can go to lifeafteraddictionandindictment.com, or you can check out any of my social medias. Facebook, Instagram is really the main ones. LinkedIn a little bit, but that's mainly it.
We love a good success story, man. Anytime anybody can get on the other side and talk about it, happens all the time.
Amen. Yeah.
It's a good thing for sure. Steve, this has been great, man. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for being raw and revealing and getting the story out there. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much.
Good luck.
Take care.
Take care.